Hello, Councillor Donnelly, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, Keith. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, and see you. Thanks. Councillor Raza, can you hear me? Can you try your mic, please?
Yep, I can hear you.
Great, thank you.
Right, good evening, everybody. I make that 7 o'clock. I also make that the most awkward 3 minutes of silence I've experienced in a very long time. For anybody watching along and thought what was going on, we were simply just remaining quiet in order that the moment could hit 7 o'clock, at which we are technically permitted to begin the meeting. And so I shall, at this, a cabinet meeting on Wednesday, the 13th of July. I'm very delighted to welcome Tony Clements, the new Chief Executive Officer, to his first meeting as CEO and Head of Paid Service here at Cabinet. And I'll also extend welcome to Emily Hill, our Interim Chief Finance Officer and Section 151 Officer, who's joined us for this evening. So without further ado, we're going to get into the details of the meeting. So apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Mahfouz, and we have with us Councillor Raza joining on hybrid due to isolation, and Councillor Donnelly due to sit for conference. Matters to be, no urgent matters. Matters to be considered in private, as always. Where there is gold, confidential, exempt items, please do try and avoid referencing them so we don't have to eject members of the public or close down the live cast. But if you wish to, please indicate to me before you do so. Declarations of interest. There are none. Minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Malcolm, I understand that we have added to the updated minutes the indications of speakers from opposition parties, which I believe was the question you wished to raise. Is that right? That's resolved. Okay. I haven't been notified of any corrections to the minutes, so are we happy to agree them? Thank you very much. No appointments to subcommittees and to outside bodies. So, Councillor Donnelly, budget strategy and medium-term financial strategy. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And my apologies for not being able to be with you. As you indicate, I'm representing the Council at the Sit for Public Finance conference. Those who are regulars at Cabinet have heard my introduction to the MTFS paper a number of times, but I shall rehearse those arguments a little again and then make some very specific points that I think are pertinent to this paper. We produced this. It's a lot of effort for the officers, but if you boil it down, really, what it says every quarter is that all other things being equal, and bearing in mind that there are a huge number of things we don't know about what will happen in the next 3 to 4 years. These are the projected deficits that the council will need to seek to address in each of these years. But of course, because we operate hand to mouth on single year financial settlements, what happens 2 to 3 years ahead is almost entirely unforeseeable in reality. Interestingly enough, I think those like the leader and the Councillor Costigan and Councillor Wall, who were at the Local Government Association conference, heard the Secretary of State commit to move to a 2-year financial settlement beginning in 2024. This information was relayed to me. I think my exact words were, "I'll believe it when I see it." Within a week, the said Secretary of State had been sacked. And within 24 hours of that, the Prime Minister who had sacked him had himself been moved kicking and screaming towards the exit. It would be hard to imagine a more uncertain situation for local government and indeed the country than we face at the moment, with a cast of characters competing to show who can inflict most economic self-flagellation upon the country. So we remain in a state of uncertainty. We've chosen in the paper to highlight that on the whole, the proliferation of one-off or notionally one-off grants that have been received in recent years have tended to be repeated, though they are not promised to be so. One of the other things that Michael Gove said before he was defenestrated was that he wished to move away from a world in which councils were constantly bidding and competing for funds towards one where there was more certainty. And I think for once I might agree with him. However, I'd be agreeing with him in his role as a private citizen now, rather than as a Secretary of State. So the paper, as normal, points to the currently notionally projected deficits and commits the council to work towards ensuring that we meet our legal obligation to close those deficits and achieve a balance. What I really want, Chair, this evening, though, to highlight in the paper is a slightly different approach we've done to update the MTFS regarding inflation. There are some, certainly in the copy I'm looking at, the numbering within the paper goes a bit haywire. But on page 23, in what I'm looking at, what's numbered as section 3.3, talks about inflation. I don't think it will come as a surprise to anybody in the room that I'm seeing on Zoom that inflation has, gone through the roof in recent months, and it's by no means certain that it's peaked, and it's certainly by no means certain when we'll see it come under control. And I think we took the view, myself and officers this time around, that it was responsible to update our forecasts in a world in which inflation was no longer 2 to 3%, but is raging up at 9 to 10%, to look at the potential implications for us in that approach. So what we've looked to do is to update it. You'll see some scenarios have been put together later in the paper, if I can scroll down, in 5.5, some scenario modelling around the budget gap. We've looked there at the different approaches we could take. Scenario 1 there, broadly speaking, is where we've been at. Scenario 3 is if we modelled at something like the headline inflation figure that's currently prevailing. What we've looked to do, though, is to unpick the different costs the council faces in terms of salaries, in terms of contract costs, which are the two biggest areas in which we are exposed to increased costs. And as has been indicated at the beginning of the paper, we're asking the committee to note really that scenario 2B within table 2 in 5.5.1 is where we think currently we're most likely to sit, looking ahead in 23-24 with the current impact of inflation. As you see, that moves us on quite substantially. In terms of the budget gap, it's up from around 25 million to 38 million. And it means that really, even if all of the possible grants that we have set to one side but think might come to us, even if they do come to us, it will merely bring us down to what previously our anticipated gross figure for a deficit will be. So, I mean, far be it from me to depress the meeting from afar, but certainly we need to be cognizant of the fact that this year will be challenging unless and until the government steps up to support local government and indeed support the people of this country in general. I'm not sure that we can budget, as it were, on that. But I think it's important to bring to Cabinet's attention that these are the changing circumstances to which we will have to adapt. Thanks. Sorry to go on at more length than usual, but I thought worth just being clear what the background and the main purpose of the paper was.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly. I have a request to speak from Councillor Boostertill.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Firstly, very quickly, I'd like to congratulate Emily in her new role and thank her and the team for the briefing that they did the other day for us. Very useful. Thank you very much. So I've a couple of questions. The first question I'd like to ask is, with respect to the level of non-earmarked reserves, do you believe that the current level of reserves are on the low side in the context of the current economic situation?
I think 1 second, Councillor Donnelly. I'd encourage you to ask all of your questions at once because I won't be returning to you.
Okay, no problem. My second question is, and this is in two parts, with inflation rising as per the report, what is the likely impact on future year shortfalls or revenue gaps on frontline services if inflation hits 15% or higher? Do you fear a situation like Brent, who commented earlier this week that they may need help from the government to avoid something similar to insolvency?
Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you. Can I welcome Councillor Busuttil to his new role? I'm sure I'll be seeing more of him, and not the back of his head, which is all I've got the pleasure of seeing this evening. I think the answers to those two questions are linked. The first one surprises me somewhat. Do I think our levels of reserves are on the low side? Well, back when I presented the budget for the current year, one of the contexts in which I put it was that our reserves, while respectable, were at the lower end of the range of those held across London, for example, which is why I made specific provision in those proposals for an increase in reserves, an increase against which his party spoke and against which his party voted. So I'm delighted that he has come late to the realization that the action was appropriate and may need to be continued to be appropriate. But I think we have improved our relative position vis-a-vis reserves. I am comfortable that we are in a position to meet a shock, even should it come along. But I think, as I said back in March, the worry really in the Brexit COVID world is that shocks are tending to come in 1-2s and 1-2-3s, and that councils need perhaps to be more wary than they have been of the sky falling in. On the second part of the question, I mean, I guess I'd return him to the opening part of my remarks, which is the unforeseeable is unforeseeable. I mean, of course, I'm concerned about the prospect of long-term rampant inflation if there is no underpinning system in government for protecting local government and indeed all forms of public service from its implications. But I've nothing to go on and no particular reason, absolutely no particular reason to suggest that Ealing should be have particular cause to be worried. So you know, we're going to keep an eye on this, and we're going to lobby, as we always do, to get the best possible results for Ealing.
Okay, I'm going to invite any members from Cabinet who wish to speak. All I'd say is I was there when Michael Gove made that speech. I thought, my goodness, it's going to be a year late. We won't get that 2-year funding settlement this year, but at least that may be a sort of a very, 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 very small sliver of silver in an otherwise cloudy night. So more clouds ahead by the look of things. Noting the recommendations in the report, are Cabinet happy to agree? Thank you very much. So let's us move to the commitment of public health grant to fund new inequalities and engagement initiatives. Councillor Raza.
Thank you, Chair. With very clear commitments to reduce inequalities at Ealing and the need to tackle these inequalities has really been highlighted and is aspirated throughout the pandemic, as we saw only too well, that the sort of wider context that's explored in the findings and demands of the Independent Race Equality Commission. So underlying this also is a need to sort of strengthen how the council does engagement with all of our communities and to support the achievements of these aims and opportunities of fundings which have been sort of proactively identified in this public health grant for two particular initiatives which I draw your attention to. So the first of these is to set aside 90,000 to continue and expand the Communities Champion programme. So this is a programme of work that has been established using the national government's funding, which was related to the COVID Champions programme, but this funding will end in September. And given the
Councillor Raza, we are losing you slightly, so it may be worth turning off your
committed to
Councillor Raza.
Yeah.
So we're losing you, so perhaps turn off your camera.
Okay. Hopefully that's a bit better and you can hear me. So where was I? Yeah, so the public health approach has used this sort of champions system before in other things, and it's worked quite successfully. So we'd like to sort of continue doing that and to evolve the programme into building on our learning to date. So this would be a really significant relationship sort of to build up. And so if we'd started this championship programme, we'd like to continue it, which is what basically we're saying. And this funding would be there to do that. So the second sort of initiative is the one-off bidding process that we've got. So this is to support innovation across the council for small initiatives to help reduce health inequalities. So we're setting aside £400,000 for this. And this will create this sort of one-off cross-council innovations fund to reduce inequalities. And it would provide a resource to support delivery of the council's commitments and also in our manifesto in response to the Race Equality Commission demands. The funding will also prioritise the demands for the REC and the communities who also felt that the impacts of the pandemic was most severely felt in these areas. And the projects will need to demonstrate that they're sustainable and ensure that there's the impact of this funding will be meaningful and lasting. So hopefully it will give everybody the scope that they need to be really innovative about how they deliver public health to our most needy communities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Don't have any requests to speak unless anybody else from Cabinet wishes to raise a point. Okay, in that case, if I could point towards the recommendations in the report and ask that they are agreed. Thank you very much. The council performance report, end of year. There are certain Cabinet members who have had to wait a whole year to be able to speak on a performance report, and they will get the opportunity to do so today. Obviously, we're now going through the process of updating our council plan, which of course all political parties will discuss at our July meeting, which will and I can give people fair warning, will contain a whole different set and range of key performance indicators as we really focus the administration's priorities on that which the public endorsed in the elections in May. So therefore, what we certainly have at the start of this civic cycle, if you like, is the final of the 4 quarterly of annual performance reports of the previous administration. So don't be surprised if they're different when we get to the full council. But for the time being, we're going to give each cabinet member the opportunity just to speak briefly on the performance report in each of their portfolios. So first, I'm going to invite Councillor Raza.
Thank you, Chair. So the two of the three sort of crime and safety indicators were on this report were met or within the tolerance of their sort of yearly target, and we kind of it's work in progress, and we can do better, and we will aim to do better, but it's falling within the tolerance. So I'd like to appreciate that fact. But the really good news stories have been around our youth justice system, where first-time entrants to our youth justice system, sort of between the ages of 10 and 17, are much better than the target that we were aiming for. And we continue to work with our partners to sort of divert our young people away from criminal justice system and through the sort of out-of-court processes that are in place. Also, the percentage of young offenders who are engaged in sort of suitable education, training and employment in Ealing was very high. And this was due to a sort of dedicated careers advisor working with all our youth justice system children to ensure that they have a meaningful offer in place to support them as an alternative to offending. So that a dedicated tuition and also the sort of wraparound support that has been possible thanks to the Violence Reduction Initiative, particularly around West Side, has been really helpful to make sure that we get this really good result. So I'm very, very pleased to draw everybody's attention to this very good result. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Climate Action, Councillor Costigan.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think a very good set of results actually towards kind of the end of us using this set of indicators, and I look forward to see the new indicators. But the indicators currently that we focus on really are national inspections of street cleaning, litter, detritus, fly posting and graffiti, and we've got a very good set of results. And in fact, I've just seen the most recent results, and some of it is the best results we've had in a decade. So it really is a testament to the decision that we made to bring our refuse and street cleaning back in-house. It has had a massive impact on our ability to control the quality of the service we offer in terms of picking up the rubbish and cleaning the streets. So testament, great job by our staff, and also, in terms of how we manage that and how we make sure that those rounds are working well. There is some issue still, I think, around the availability of HGV drivers, which is an issue that unfortunately the Conservative government has not done very much to sort out. We've had long-term impacts across the country with a lack of suitably qualified HGV drivers. We are doing our best to make sure we keep on top of this situation. And like I say, many other boroughs are in the same situation. I have, as I've previously said, written to government about this, but they've done nothing. I guess the Conservative Party are fairly busy at the moment with other stuff, so they're probably not that worried about people kneeling and whether we get our rubbish collected or not. But maybe when they've got a new leader, I'll write to them again and ask if they could invest in training up HGV drivers, in making it easier for people to become qualified. Thanks.
Healthy Lives, Councillor Blacker.
Thank you. And I think I mentioned before, and thanks the staff in adult services for keeping the average waiting time for assessments down, and it continues to be down. It's a fantastic achievement, and the team should be very proud of themselves. Obviously, it can be a very stressful time for those who are accessing our services, waiting for those assessments. So getting those done in a timely manner is fantastic, and it's significantly down on target and significantly down on our performance at the end of last year as well. So it's really fantastic. I think also just draw attention to the number of care reviews and the fact that our staff are, again, working incredibly hard to make sure that we're performing those reviews and getting them done, again, far above target. But it's a good set of indicators. I won't mention leisure centres because we might, Councillor Anand, want to mention leisure centres in a later report.
Thank you very much. Over to Councillor Nagpal, a fair start.
Thanks, Chair. So percentage of students achieving level 3 by 19. This is green, 73.9% against a target of 71%. Ealing schools continue to outperform against the national and London average on this measure. The high figure reflects too the overall percentage of pupils reaching the higher grades at GCSE and moving on to level 3 courses, and the popularity of school sixth forms in attracting pupils. The percentage of Ealing schools rated good or outstanding by Ofsted. This is green, 93% against a target of 92.1%. So 15 schools have been inspected since Ofsted resumed their inspections after the pandemic. 14 of those were judged to be good in this period. So the overall percentage now is actually 95%. And this is due to timely and proportionate health checks of all schools, which help to identify risks early, and effective support is brokered through school-to-school collaboration. Every school is connected through strong and robust leadership and professional networks, with peer-to-peer review being well established to support continuous improvement. Percentage of 16 to 17-year-olds not in education, employment or training. This is green, 0.7% against a target of 1.5%. And it's because we have a strong working relationship with the employment and skills team through a service level agreement. Intrusive one-to-one support is provided to children and young people to identify suitable employment, training and education opportunities for them and to support them into the opportunity. There are connections workers in all our youth centres. This is linked to the website, so young people can self-refer for an appointment or drop in, and connection workers are also in 11 of our secondary schools and special schools. Thank you.
One of the things that we might hope that does fall off of the government's agenda as part of the current sort of bun fight to become the Prime Minister is, of course, the schools white paper, which bizarrely insists that local authorities dispose of state-maintained schools by 2030. And, you know, with 95% of all of our schools now being good or outstanding, it makes absolute no sense whatsoever that we should disrupt the school system in such a way. And, you know, maybe the Prime Minister's new PPS, whatever the term may be, just like the old one, could have words. And I'm sure we know people in the room who know people in the room who know others who might be able to make that happen. But let's wait and see. Decent living incomes. Councillor Mahfouz isn't here. Councillor Manro, I know that you've got one that's very similar under the Good Growth portfolio. So I'll bring you in here now, and maybe you could reflect on them both.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so number of residents supported to gain work has gone up to 2,122, which is a very good figure, because obviously when we want people to find work, and if we can support residents who need support to actually get work, that's the best way to get decent living incomes into the borough. There are a number of new areas where we're looking at. So there's a new one in number of youth workplace opportunities, including apprenticeships. Again, that's a new measure. Number of registered London living wage employers. Again, we are on target, but it's a new measure which has gone up, but we need to go higher up. And I would say there is another one in inclusive economy, which is percentage of businesses formed in 2019 surviving after 1 year, which again is a new measure, but that also comes under good growth, because one of the first ones coming in, and hopefully more of them will come in under the new targets that we will set, is the number of new business registrations in the borough. Again, that's up compared to a target of 100. So therefore, really, this is the focus change around creating high quality jobs and bringing in investment into the borough through the new companies and new business registrations. So this is a really good news story.
Thank you very much. Councillor Donnelly, inclusive economy. We're going to bring in Councillor Wall, genuinely affordable homes.
Thank you, Chair. We knew that last year would be a particularly difficult year for our residents after COVID and the government ending the eviction ban and ending furlough. And we set ourselves a target of preventing 30% of approaches for homelessness becoming homeless. In actual fact, we far exceeded that, and we prevented 45.4% of homeless approaches, which equates to 1,722 homeless approaches that were prevented out of 3,829. So we did very, very well there. And we also tried very, very hard to keep families out of bed and breakfast accommodation. And we had anticipated that because of what was going on economically, we'd have 100 families go in, but we actually only had 20 at the end of the year. So our team's very proactive early intervention approach has been very successful, and I commend their good work.
And bizarrely, of course, the most important metric, of course, in genuinely affordable homes for the administration over the 4-year period was, of course, the delivery of 2,500 genuine affordable homes, and that's precisely what we delivered. Not necessarily in the performance report, but absolutely something to be commended, and to commend the team for delivering. I think we can go back to Councillor Donnelly on inclusive economy.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for that. The hotel Wi-Fi logged me out because it was 24 hours since I first accessed it, so I had to go back in again. Technology. Yeah. Just 3 indicators to report on. We've seen, as you see, a big improvement in percentage of services designated available and easily accessed through digital. I mean, that's a very big improvement since the last time I was able to report to Cabinet on this, and we were hopeful we see a big improvement, and that has come through. So thank you to all the officers around the council who pulled together to make that happen. Obviously, we don't confuse that with all services being equally well used or well known to the public, and that's a separate operation that we need to push through to ensure that there's awareness and that there's the maximum people make the maximum use of these services now that they're available and easy to use. We've got a new indicator here about what percentage of businesses formed in 2019 were surviving after a year. As you see, it's 89. It's slightly over the 89% target that we set. So that is good news, particularly bearing in mind what a traumatic year 2020 was. The area where we continue to have difficulties within my patch, and again relates back to that trauma, is percentage of the sick absence levels among staff. Clearly, it's been an extremely turbulent time in terms of fluctuating levels of COVID, and of course, we have all the issues around long COVID, and of course the longer term, mental health impacts of COVID to take into account, which and there's no doubt all of this has negatively impacted the sick absence figures. But I think we still owe an enormous debt of thanks to our people for having done so much to hold the borough together in very difficult times.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Anand, Thriving Communities.
Thank you, Chair. The number of participants attracted to take part in the borough's culture offer annually has increased, and that's a green, and it's a medium-term ambition also for us to become a London Borough of Culture in order to celebrate and to make the most of the wonderful and diverse range of grassroots dance and theatre artistic groups within the borough. It's fantastic because we've also launched our cultural manifesto with the culture renewal plan. So we recently launched that, and we are asking for the groups to participate. And I think the figures will go up as the consultation process ends.
Okay, thank you very much. There are, of course, a handful of indicators that we won't actually get until later in the year because of the point at which they're released or tabulated by sort of other organisations and central government in terms of some of the reporting that happens, but of course that they will come back at a later point. So just to echo my word of thanks to officers and to members for all of the work that was done over the previous year to get us to the situation that we are now. Of course, we will review what those indicators will look like for the next 4 years, and we'll be continuing to have that dialogue about the performance of the authority, and look forward to all of the great things that we will deliver in the years to come. So with that, are the recommendations in the report noted and agreed? Thank you very much. We now move on to the Southall reset. So as members will be aware, one of the first things that we did as a new administration on taking over in 2021 was to say very clearly that we didn't believe anymore that the area opportunity framework in Southall captured the aspirations of residents of that town. And indeed that the change that had been experienced in Southall, very much led by a pre-pandemic economic model that suggested that the future of our borough was of a suburban residential character, actually had to be changed. And that the future of Southall absolutely needed to be one in which we reflected and respected the historic role that that town has played as the backbone of not just Ealing's economy, but also West London's overall economy too. And that our priority in Southall shouldn't be that we send rich people on rich bits of infrastructure from rich flats, but that we needed to find, well, or indeed that those on low incomes should have to catch the 207 to go and clean them. And that in actual fact, we needed to set out a new vision for Southall, one in which puts skills, employment, and local good jobs at the heart of everything that we do in Southall. That work has continued over the past year, and it was very, very fantastic to be able to be at the Southall Manor House just earlier this week to see that building open after 13 years of being vacant as a new creative incubation hub for new business, for innovators and for creators and for makers that will really be able to anchor that type of activity in Southall and incubate the entrepreneurs of tomorrow. We've now done a significant amount of research, not least through the Shaping Ealing survey of residents, but also some continued work around economic regeneration and through the local plan to really set out what the future of Southall ought to be. And that's the information that's attached to the report. And you can see why that big reset button needs to be pressed, particularly in the context of COVID, the highest rates of furlough amongst Ealing and perhaps across all of London overall, and the continued impact that we know that we face with the slowdown, if not the breaking of the supply chain from Heathrow and the wider economic consequences and shock. That's the context. There is an action plan associated with it. It's not just good that we say what we think the problems are. We absolutely need to work on the solutions. And therefore, I'm going to bring in first Councillor Manro and then Councillor Costigan and other cabinet members who are going to set out what those actions are going to be. So Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Chair. As you indicated, there has been a reset for Southall, and part of that reset is we actually need to deliver actions rather than just a report. So first things first, it's around having a community-led regeneration charter for Southall. So we actually, and it will be for the 7 towns of Ealing. It's about speaking and actually listening to the residents and understanding what their issues are. And some of the reports, such as the Southall Planning Baseline Report, the employment audit, lays out very clearly all the issues that are prevalent in what is, I think, 21% of the population of Ealing, the Ealing Borough live in Southall. So it's a very large part of our borough, and we need to tackle some of those underlying issues. So we need not only do that, but we need to expand and celebrate the local high street economy of Southall with supporting infrastructure for visitors who come from every part of the country, as well as overseas, India, America, Canada. Southall has a retail offer which is worldwide in many, many of the issues: gold, I mean, some of the gold shops have factories which manufacture in Dubai, and then they import back into the UK to sell gold on the high street in Southall and other shops. So there are some large businesses in Southall which deliver real value, and we just see the shop fronts, but we don't see the background entrepreneurial spirit in Southall. So we need to make sure that we actually deliver the environmental improvements and the supporting infrastructure for that kind of offer to be offered and actually supported, and therefore bring valuable income into Southall. We also need to look at a review of Section 106 and also look at bringing in a community infrastructure levy funding for new developments, for new infrastructure, for education, health, and community facilities. So there will be some development in Southall. Some of it is already baked in, which the baseline report says. So some of the permissions have already been given. So if those are built out, we need to make sure the supporting infrastructure is there, ready to support the residents as they move into those new homes and new commercial premises and new businesses. The new local plan engagement to shape the town centre, shape our Southall town, will really inform the future planning design of buildings, heritage, high streets, and our industrial and open spaces. So that's what the local plan will do, so that in the future, we actually follow a different philosophy around creating more employment space, making sure that good quality employers come into Southall and actually really deliver the jobs that are required for our community locally. The 20-minute city concept in terms of walking to work and have access to all the infrastructure requirements in Southall is what we want to do. And we will do that for all our 7 towns in the borough.
Councillor Costigan.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, as part of this report and as part of the reset button that we're pressing in Southall, we're initiating a really brilliant new project, I think, that's going to be great for Southall, which is the Southall Active Travel Project. So what we're doing in this is we're going to spend almost £10 million in the Southall area in looking at how we make it easier for people in Southall to walk, to cycle, to run, to scoot, to use all of those active travel methods to get around the town. I think there's, one of the great things about Southall is the hustle and bustle of the area, I think. And, that's certainly something that we don't want to lose. And I know Councillor Manro has gone through, the kind of the economic side of it and how we want to make sure that there's those new businesses. But, another issue is sometimes there's quite a lot of congestion in the town centre, and it's not a pleasant place sometimes to walk or to cycle. So we're really focusing this active travel project on bringing active travel to Southall. I think we want everywhere in the borough to have equal access to be able to use these modes of transport. And this money will make sure that we can bring active travel to Southall. So we're looking at £9.3 million being focused on this initiative. And as part of that, we'll also be providing bike hangers, electric vehicle charging points. We'll be improving the roads, tracks and pavements, and also looking at cycling infrastructure. Also working with Let's Go Southall, which has been hugely popular and hugely successful in the area. We know, Chair, of course, that we have already committed to planting 50,000 trees in the borough. We'll be making sure that a significant portion of those trees will go to Southall, so we make it into a more beautiful and resilient place. I think, greening Southall is also going to be important for the future. So you've got that shade in the summer and you can make it into somewhere attractive for people to go to. We're also going to be monitoring and improving air quality in Southall. And some people will have seen, we announced earlier this week that we're spending £250,000 on monitoring air quality in schools, and we'll be making sure that some of that monitoring, those monitoring devices, go to schools in Southall, and that we're also working around education in order to attract more people into using active travel modes. We're going to be developing an action plan, explaining how we're going to work on increasing enforcement of highways contraventions in Southall, because as I say, this has been an issue. We will also continue to work, we're working with London councils to try and get the government to give us the power to enforce 20-mile-per-hour zones. Unfortunately, they won't give us that power at the moment, but there is a transport bill which apparently is coming forward, though again, who knows, with the new leadership of the Conservative Party, what might happen. But as part of that transport bill, we'll be pushing to see if we can get the powers to enforce 20-mile-per-hour zones, but we will be working beyond that to increase enforcement in the Southall area. And we'll be working with Greener Ealing, because Southall is one of the areas where we've got lower uptake of food recycling, and we want to make sure that we don't have issues of, you know, kind of smelly stuff in bins on the streets in Southall. And we're actually starting a door knocking initiative where council officers are going around knocking on doors throughout the borough, explaining to residents in areas where there's low involvement in the food waste service, what the service is all about, how it can help them, and how to get involved. And I think lastly, we're going to be exploring a new connecting route between Windmill Lane Industrial Estate and Merrick Road, again, about kind of, you know, that connectivity in Southall. So both the active travel side of things and also kind of keeping it that business hub, the bustling centre of Southall. Thanks, Chair.
And also importantly, keeping HGVs out of our ward, Councillor Anand. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome the report. And then as it says, Chair, Southall reset. You know, it is time for a new vision for South. And exactly as the report mentions, it's time for reset, time for the councils to reflect on the priorities of the local community in Southall. So the report actually acknowledges how it will build a new relationship with Southall residents and businesses. And that's evident in the action plan, because we're committed to town forums, and we have committed to setting aside funding to launch our town forums. And we're working on proposals which will include both the Southall partners, which are residents, the Southall community, so that the new model is very open, inclusive, and it moves away from the old system where there's been the them and us, where the council has been on one side of the table and the residents on the other. I think these forums should be led by our local community and our businesses, so that it really reflects on the needs and the issues that will come out of those conversations. So the approach is to really engage and to ensure that we have a constructive two-way dialogue with the community and the businesses, so that we can listen as well as we can talk. Just a bit about our wonderful initiative that Councillor Costigan mentioned, which is Let's Go Southall. We have committed to investing 3.2 million in improving cycling safety and accessibility in Southall, which includes investment in our award-winning Let's Go Southall program and the new Wellbeing Way along the canal towpath, which will open up lots of healthy initiatives, cycling initiatives, and it'll open up the area for people to actually walk and use, because it's been like a no-go area. And the funding that we've secured for the improvement of the canal towpaths will really allow the residents to make use of that. And we're committed to distributing 1,000 bikes to Let's Go Southall participants, and about 200 which have already been delivered, and we will continue to roll this program out over the next year. And we're working with our partners to find suitable ways to resource the bikes at efficient cost, and we're trying to cut the waste, and we will provide also 35 updated bikes for disabled users. So there's really exciting times for Southall, and it is the plan that is going to be delivered, and it's time that we press that button.
Any more comments from cabinet members? So I invite cabinet members to review the recommendations of the report, and I ask, are you happy to press that reset button for Southall? Thank you. Okay, next we are going to the transport programme for 2022 and 2023. Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Chair. This is an annual report that we bring to Cabinet, setting out the transport projects that we hope to bring forward in the coming year. However, this year we're in a slightly different situation than a normal year, in that quite a lot of the funding for these transport initiatives comes from Transport for London. That's how boroughs in London work. We get our funding from Transport for London in the main. From Transport for London for these kind of transport support initiatives. However, due to the impact of COVID and the massive decrease in fares from the tube and from buses during COVID, Transport for London has, of course, got a well-documented black hole, basically, in its income. Due to that. And there's been ongoing discussions with government to try and get government to accept that it has some responsibility and duty to keep transport going in the capital. However, unfortunately, government has been not very keen to accept that responsibility, despite the fact of having stepped in other areas of the country. They've not been doing that to the same extent in London. And what we've had instead is some very short-term deals with inadequate funding that barely covers the day-to-day for Transport for London, let alone the funding needed for boroughs like Ealing to make sure that our transport infrastructure is kept up to date, that we keep our roads safe, and that we're able to invest in active travel. So I'm very sorry to say that the last funding settlement was to go up to the 24th of June, but the government refused to make a deal with TfL. And so that settlement, so there was a 2-week extension to the 13th of July. And in that period, we just got a tiny bit of extra funding to tide us over. So today is the 13th of July, and at the 12th, is it the 11th hour? The government have again come in and said, oh, we're going to wait another 2 weeks. So we've got another 2 weeks extension before we find out if we get any funding. And there is no funding during that 2 weeks. So we have no funding whatever at the moment. So I'm afraid to say, although I think this is a great transport plan, and I'd really like to commend it to colleagues, and I'll go through in a tiny bit more detail in a moment, but I have to say that there is a massive caveat, and that is that the funding from Transport for London, which comes from the government, is by no means secure. And we will not find out for at least another couple of weeks, and who knows how much longer, because the government just keeps on saying wait another 2 weeks, wait another 2 weeks. So we do not know when it will become clear as to the level, if any, of our funding. However, that being said, what we've put forward here, Chair, is a package of £8 million in capital and almost £2 million in revenue funding for what I think is a really great package of transport support initiatives in the borough that covers both cycle lanes, road safety, cycle training, and also greening areas of the borough, electric vehicle charging points, a whole host of different initiatives that are going to make a big difference. There's a great map in the back of this report, Chair, which shows you where a lot of these initiatives are focused on in the borough. And I think there's a really good geographical spread. So we're looking at completing a cycle lane in Greenford and another in Northolt. We're also looking at the Northolt Levelling Up project and getting that kicked off. That's a huge project on the Mandeville Road. And in addition, we're looking at road safety measures around Pope's Lane in South Ealing. And various other areas of the borough as well will be covered by some of the initiatives that are cross-borough. So I think it's a really good set of plans, and right down the centre of this map is the Uxbridge Road, of course, and we are continuing with our aspirations to run a cycle lane down the Uxbridge Road, and this transport strategy includes that next section of the Uxbridge Road. Now, as to what happens next, the report basically says if we do not get the government funding that we need, if Transport for London does not get the government funding that they need, we will delegate to officers in consultation with myself and Councillor Blacker as the portfolio members, a reduced programme where we will do our very best to find what other monies we can within the council to bring forward as many of these initiatives as possible, which is what we have been doing during this period of massively constrained funding. But it does delegate that power to us in case that was to happen. Just one other point in the report, and that is that it does outline the success of the dockless bikes in the borough, and goes through some of the usage. There has been increased usage and they've been very successful. We also get a little bit of money in from them, so that's a positive as well. And the report asks that we now extend the dockless bikes both geographically, so there's greater coverage across the borough, and also to allow other operators in so we can have some competition. I think, again, I would recommend that we accept that as well, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. Councillor Blacker, anything to add?
No, I think Councillor Costin's covered it. I'm happy to hear from those who wish to speak on it.
Councillor Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. I share Councillor Costigan's frustration with the government's approach to funding on this and similar issues. I've got two questions. Firstly about bike hangers and then second about EVC charging points. So onto the bike hangers, which we obviously support, on the 100 or more that we hope to get around the borough, what's the process that you will follow if you get the funding in terms of site selection, and then how will people be consulted on that, just to make sure we get an idea of that process? And then secondly, on the EV charging points, in the report in paragraph, I think 3.18 on 234, it only mentions the Source London charging points, not the Ubitricity, and the latter is a lot more expensive than the former. Will you confirm that the idea is that both types will be expanded in that 2,000 or so that you're hoping to spread across the whole borough? And what's the sort of expected price that someone might be looking to pay when they're coming on board, if all of them do?
Go ahead. Yep.
Thanks, Councillor Malcolm, and thank you very much for your support for your support for our frustration, your equal frustration as regards the lack of government funding for Transport for London, and as an impact on that, the lack of funding for Ealing and for our residents. In terms of the bike hangers, which I'm glad also to get your support on our rollout of bike hangers, and we're looking at the moment about bringing forward consultation on where we would have bike hangers. We're going to base it on a few different issues. So it would partly be, of course, we want to make sure we get coverage throughout the borough. So we wouldn't want to, focus all of the bike hangers in one area. But we also, of course, want to be able to address demand. So we will be listening to what local residents are saying and to what local councillors are saying too, as to where the demand might be. Because, some of the usage of bike hangers will come from people who live in flats. So there may be areas in the borough that are particularly high need for bike hangers. But we will be bringing forward a way that people can kind of come with their ideas as to the best placement. And we will have to also consult, because it does, obviously take up some of the roadway. In terms of the electric vehicle charging points, and I'm really glad he's brought this up, because I had some really great meetings with residents actually in the last couple of weeks about electric vehicle charging points. And the great news is, I think that there's a huge amount of support in Ealing for people both who already have electric vehicle charging points and want to, electric vehicles, and want to work with the council to help us expand our offer of charging points. And also people who've not yet taken the plunge, but are really keen, again, to explain to us what the barriers are and how we could address them going forward. So what we want to do with the charging points is really offer people as many choices as possible. And so, really we're kind of trying to work with as many different providers as we can, so that we can get in the maximum number of electric vehicle charging points. And there will be different prices for some of those providers. I can get the councillor a full breakdown of what we expect with the different providers. So I'm happy to provide you with that, Councillor Malcolm. But there are also issues around the type of charging point we can put in particular areas. So for example, the lamppost ones are only suitable for about half of the lampposts in the borough. And that's because of things like, underground access points, what we used to call manholes, metal, and wiring and that kind of thing in the vicinity of the lampposts. So we can't always put electric vehicle charging points where residents might most logically want them to be or think that they would be most suitable. However, as you will have seen, we have consulted On previous rounds of electric vehicle charging points, we've also looked at retrofitting and bringing in parking bays for those that didn't previously have parking bays. And we will be bringing forward the results of the most recent consultation very shortly. And I can say that we very much listen to residents. It's a partnership, really, I think. You know, we want to encourage people. We don't want to create barriers, but we also want to get everybody, you know, we want to get everybody behind us in the community. So we have taken on board points made by councillors and by local residents where they felt that some of our plans didn't make sense or could more helpfully have been cited elsewhere. But I'll get you the details on the pricing for each provider.
And Councillor Blackwright, I mean, I've seen your collection of bikes safely stored within your property, so I know that you don't need a bike hanger, but I think you've got I think you wanted to come in on bike hangers.
Yeah, I don't know if I should have declared an interest, since I would want to get my bikes out of my flat. There is one on my road. No, I think Councillor Malcolm kind of welcomed the bike hangers if we get the funding for it, but I think he should probably remember the cabinet meeting we had in May where we approved capital funding for those. So those will be delivered regardless of whether the government decide to give London the resource it needs.
Councillor Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question. I'm pleased to hear that about the focus on cyclist training, especially for young cyclists. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on how you're going to roll that out, how much you're going to spend on it?
Are there any more questions? Because it's just the one go. Yeah,
that's my go.
Go, great.
Well, actually, the funding via the government didn't allow for any spending on cycle training. So we've had to cut that back massively, I'm afraid. So again, it will really depend on the government. It's very unfortunate. It has been something that a lot of campaign groups have been raising over the last year. I'm sort of surprised, Councillor Gallant, you weren't aware, because I think a lot of campaign groups have been having a real pop at the Conservative government for not backing cycle training. And what we did manage to do over the last year was get together a small bit of money here and there that we left over from previous projects, and we managed to spend that on cycle training. But in fact, cycle training hasn't been properly funded by the government for the last number of months, very sadly.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, tickle in my throat. Of course, not only will we be addressing this report now in terms of the recommendations which I draw Cabinet members' attention to, but of course, the next Cabinet meeting in September, we're going to be considering the outcome of the extensive engagement work we've been doing on the Travel in Ealing Charter, which of course is going to fundamentally support all of the work that the team will do in terms of the programme implementation to make sure that we're doing genuinely what every local authority should do, which is to engage the public in all of those decisions that are going to impact them, learning all of the best lessons that there are to be learned out there from fantastic boroughs who've made such strong and active progress and take pride in their active travel programmes to make sure that we do it very well here in Ealing too. So I look forward to seeing that come forward, and I know that it will be welcomed, I hope, across the board as I look at the opposition parties. So with that in mind, can I ask that Cabinet note and agree the recommendations in the report? Thank you very much. And to, I believe, our final agenda item, the Ealing Indoor and Outdoor Sports Facility Strategy and Action Plan up until 2031, Councillor Anand.
Thank you, Chair. The Ealing Indoor and Outdoor Sports Facility Strategy and the Action Plan for 2022 to 2031 is a follow-on document to the highly successful 2012 to 21 version, which sought to achieve a lasting sporting legacy from the London 2012 Games for Ealing residents. Since 2012, the Council and our external partners have invested around 50 million in improving our sports facilities in Ealing for the benefit of our local residents and grassroots sport and active recreation. The impact of having the right sporting infrastructure in place was evident at the Ealing Sports Awards presentation last night, when the achievements of sports people of all ages and abilities from across the borough was celebrated, along with the tireless work of volunteers and sport clubs and organizations, which are all based in Ealing. So, Chair, over the 10-year life of the new strategy, the up-to-date evidence base will help inform planning policy decisions regarding the protection, enhancement, and provision of existing and the future indoor and outdoor sports facilities, providing an understanding of the best locations for any new facilities. Chair, also the major infrastructure projects to be delivered in the next 10-year period include the redevelopment of Ealing's flagship facility, Gurnell Leisure Centre, and Dormers Wells Leisure Centre in Southall, plus the revitalisation of Warren Farm Sports Ground to re-establish it as a strategically important multi-sport, multi-pitch priority facility in line with the findings of the new facility strategy in harmony with the local nature reserve setting. So Chair, I really look forward to bringing future reports to Cabinet detailing progress on these strategic projects, which are so important to the long-term health and well-being of our residents. Quite a few recommendations, Chair, in the report for us to agree tonight.
Thank you very much. Councillor Baker, did you have anything to add? Or are you content? Okay, so I believe we've got questions again from both opposition parties. So I'll go to Councillor Malcolm first.
Let me thank Councillor Anne for a couple of answers to questions that we discussed earlier today. The one I've yet to get clarified fully, and you may need to get details later, is on page 56 on Southfield Rec, there is a replacement pavilion, which we'd be in support of. There is also an outstanding agreement between the council and an organisation, a charity called W4 Youth, who want to set up a youth club there, which obviously will bring a lot of benefits to Acton and Chiswick. Have W4 Youth been asked for their views on this particular sort of cabinet item, if you like, just to make sure that there are no negatives or problems with this proposal, and that if funding can be materialise in the future, both schemes can go ahead working together with each other.
Can I come to that? Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. W4 charity organisation, because of COVID restrictions, I think the consultation and the project that they were looking at on the Southfield Rec came to a sort of a halt, but I think they are back in action and we are working with them, and all our partners are being consulted and have been consulted on the sports strategy. Hence, we've got the action plan in place. And yes, we are working with West4 to make sure the investment comes into the borough and into the rec.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councillor Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, again, I had a very good chat with Councillor Anand this afternoon, and she answered all my questions for now. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, as always. If you ask a question in advance of Cabinet, you're likely to get an answer. So that's something that Councillor Malcolm knows very well, and of course, you're very welcome to do that. So with that, can I direct Cabinet members to the recommendation in the report and ask that they are agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And that concludes the meeting of Cabinet this evening. I believe the date of the next meeting is, we don't have it, but it's going to be in the future because of course we're going to have one. So I'll see you all then. Thank you very much. Oh, all right, 14th of September. So see you then. All right, see you soon. Bye.
Right.